and very difficult to understand. And but remember, the rabbis say things. Rish Lakish said, we are in Daf Chet Amud Aleph. Mi sheyesh lo beit knesset be'iro ve'enu nichnas sham litpalel nikra shechen ra. Somebody who has a synagogue in his neighborhood, in his city, but generally we're not talking about a city the size of New York. We're talking about villages that they used to live in. And he doesn't go pray there. He's called an evil neighbor. Well, I don't think anybody wants to be called an evil neighbor. Even evil people don't like to be called evil. But an evil neighbor is someone who doesn't go to pray in the synagogue. Now, how can that be? Well, it brings a support for the idea. Shneimar ko amar Hashem al kol shecheni ara'im anogim b'nahala asher hinchalti et ami et Yisrael hineni not sham me'al matam ve'et beit Yehuda etush mitocham. That's a long pasuk from Yirmiyahu Hanavi. Let's translate it. Maybe we'll understand more how they derive the fact that if you don't pray in the local synagogue, that you're called an evil neighbor, right? So the pasuk goes on. So Hashem says, all neighbors, all dwellers that are evil, that touch the inheritance that God inherited to my people, he says. In other words, these are people that are not necessarily attached to the Jewish tradition the way we understand, because there's no ge'im b'nahala. They're touching, but it's a negative context. They're trying to grab a piece of Judaism or Yiddishkeit or Eretz Yisrael, whatever it may be. And the pasuk goes on to tell us that hineni not sham, I will remove them me'al admatam. I will take them out of the land, and even Beit Yehuda, the house of Yehuda, which is centered around Jerusalem, the Jerusalem region, they also are removed from the land. Now, the Rav here on the side notes, these are type people that go by the synagogue but don't go in, or they go look in the synagogue and they don't pray there. And this is a very interesting idea that God calls his place of prayer the place of his inheritance. So part of what we are being promised and given as Jews, as spiritual people, is an inheritance of prayer. That we should not take prayer lightly as a thing that we do once in a while if we're desperate, or we do it more if we're religious. And there's a million different ways to break down this definition. But when you think of prayer as your inheritance, I think it makes it more valuable. It touches us in a different way. And Hashem says, well, you want to touch my inheritance? You want to touch my prayer? But you don't want to go to synagogue? You don't want to join the people? The collective power that we talked about before of the human beings together is much greater than individuals alone. That person is going to be driven out of the land, according to the pshat of the pasuk. Okay. I will drive them out in exile. So that's pretty rough. Now you're not only called an evil neighbor for not going to the synagogue to pray, but you could be driven into exile, which of course is much more serious and difficult. So what's going on here? A guy is a great guy. He does good things. He just doesn't happen to go to synagogue to pray. Now he's evil. Is that what the rabbis want to tell us? Is it that black and white? Is it that dogmatic? Maybe the guy's his wife is not well and he has to stay home. Maybe he has to take care of the kids in the morning. Maybe he's been up all night learning Torah and he can't get up early again to go back to synagogue. So all of these considerations, of course, are also considered in the minds of the rabbis and in, of course, Hashem's mind. Hashem doesn't judge anybody on the simple position that we're presented with. In other words, God is unfolding the world moment by moment, and when we do good things, we're called tzaddikim, we're called the righteous. And when we do not good things, then we're called the opposite. And the world is being created moment by moment. And therefore, God is judging the world moment by moment. So even though I might have a very long tick, which in Hebrew is a file, a report file where it could be at the police station or the tax office or the social worker's office. You might have a long file, but God doesn't judge us according to the cumulative sum total of all the not good things we've done. He's judging us by the good we do in every moment. And if you do good every moment, then you're a tzaddik. And if you do one moment you do good, you're a righteous person. The next moment you fall and you don't do good, okay. So you get a new label for that moment. So I like to think of it as this changing of labels is happening subtly all the time, depending on who we are. And I think we need to understand this, because who could stand up to these statements? I don't want to be called an evil person because I didn't go to synagogue this morning, an evil neighbor, and I'm sure no one else does. And I know in my heart I want to go to synagogue, but I have my own obstacles, and so does everybody else. Now, each person is judged according to his level, and so it becomes a much more manifold, complex calculation that we are not capable of making. Okay, so with all that said, we see that though there is an importance of going to the synagogue, and why a person could be called this name is really not so simple, because it really means a person who, it's not that he can't go to synagogue, it's that he doesn't really want to. And he's not interested in joining the community. And he's not interested in being part of the collective soul of Am Yisrael. Those type of people, they're like the lone wolf, he doesn't have a pack, he doesn't have a wife, he's just out there on his own for himself. That type of person, we could see why the rabbis would frown on such a lifestyle more directly. Okay. So they said to Rabbi Yochanan, Amrulei, Rabbi Yochanan, Ika Sabbe Babavel, there is an elder or elders in Babylon. And he answers in wonder, Laman yirbu imechem bimei b'nechem al adama asher nishba Hashem lavotechem letet lehem ki yemei hashamayim al haaretz. That's from Sefer Devarim. It's a famous verse. In order that you will increase your days and the days of your children upon the land that I swore to give to your fathers, to tet them like the days of the heaven upon the earth. So you see, this verse is clearly pointing to God wanting to fulfill his promise of us being on the land. And the previous statement we learned is that by not praying in the synagogue, there's a danger we might not be able to stay on our land, on the inheritance. Aval, the Gemara goes along a simple track. There are some phrases here I would like to talk about, but let's finish the idea of shot first. Well, in the Eretz Israel is where we're talking about this strict position about praying with the community. But outside Eretz Israel, low. So the rabbis ask, well, you mean God is promising to give you a long life if you live in the land and keep the Torah, etc. But if you live somewhere else, that promise is abrogated. It's not necessarily in place, which can be a shocking unto itself. But because I live in New York, I'm not a good Jew, and I can't inherit my final inheritance from Hashem. The inheritance of this great inheritance of prayer, of course, is even more valuable, important to us, because prayer is the thing that changes the world. But in New York, no. So then why do people that live in Bavel, the Gemara is asking, and New York and wherever else live a very long, good life with the Torah, with the Jewish people? From what you're telling me, it's not the case. Because they said to him, they get up in the morning early and they go to the Beit Knesset, they go to the synagogue. That's where they're deriving their bracha from. Amar, hayinu da ahane lahu. And this is what's helping them. Kederach Shamar, as is written by Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, as he said to his own children, Banav kedimu v'hishichu v'alai lebeit kenishta. Get up early, in the dark, and take yourself to shul. Kehechi de torchu chayai. And in other words, the idea is by getting our life, we're increasing the length of life. Now, there are two ways that the rabbis measure the length of life. Of course, but another, that's called Orech Yamim, the long day, length of days. But another way of understanding the phrase Orech Yamim is the length of that. On another level, there is this idea of extending the accomplishments of a day, achieving a longer day by doing more in a shorter time. In other words, there's a sense of efficiency and productivity that's coming out of a person who goes to the synagogue and prays versus otherwise. Now, we're not talking about exceptional individuals that need to do certain types of avoda where they go and pray in strange places that nobody else goes to. That's a different thing altogether. And I mentioned earlier about people that have other conditions in their life where they can't. They have to be at work on time. There's no bus. There's no train. It's snowing. There's a million reasons. But all things being equal, going to the synagogue lengthens one's life in either of the ways that we talked about. What is this pasuk that says, these words of wisdom from the Torah, Ashrei Adam Shomea li lishkod al diltotei yom yom lishmor mezuzot pitachai. That's from Shlomo Melech, and Mishnah, the great king says, fortunate is the man who hears me. That's a pretty confident way to enter a statement, right? Fortunate are you if you listen to me. I don't know if that would work today, but maybe. If it was Shlomo Melech, I imagine it would work. Why is he fortunate to hear him? Lishkod al diltotai, to always be at my doors. So now you see the shift that takes place many times in the Pesukim of Tanakh, where it seems like Shlomo Melech's talking because it's Mishlei, but then you see that God starts talking. And that's how we know it's Ruach HaKodesh. That Shlomo shifts gears in the middle, and now it's God talking. God says, to dwell upon the doors of my house. Now, Shlomo's not talking about his palace. He's talking about the houses of all Jews everywhere, which is the Beit Knesset. Yom Yom Lishmor Mezuzot, day by day to guard the mezuzot. Here are not the parchments that we put on the doorway, but rather the whole doorway. The mezuzot, the beams or the the pillars of my entrances. In other words, just being by the door of the Beit Knesset is already a great thing. Ki motzai matzah chayim. Now this is a beautiful statement. V'yifak ratzon b'Hashem. Now this is something we all long for, really. Ki motzai. The person who finds me finds life. V'yifak ratzon b'Hashem, and he will draw out will from God. This is so important to understand. God is life force. Life force is God. Do not try to make a distinction between your desire to get up and go to synagogue and the other guy's desire to get up and go to the gym. Life is life, and God is found in life. Where you find the lack of God, I used to work in a hospice. I worked with dying people. You know, when people don't have appetite, that's a sign they don't have life. And that Hashem, they're slowly leaving this world with Hashem. The same thing, too, with the desire to be in relations. The same thing is the desire to go to work, the desire to learn Torah, the desire to pray, the desire to do good deeds. All these desires are called will, but this will is drawn from life. And so God is life. And I should say God creates life. Okay, but he's in there with it. So I know as a person born and raised secular in America, no one was explaining these things to me. God is God in heaven somewhere far away, and life is what we do here. But it's not true. We have to fix that if we hope to advance in our understanding and our service. Because in matzah chayim, matzah chayim, right? You find Hashem, you find life. And the sign of life is will. Okay? The will. And so when I check myself and I find that I don't have will, I really don't want to do this. I should say, well, you know what? If I don't want to do this, that means I'm lacking the power of life right now. And I'm not throwing it on God's doorstep. I'm throwing it on the responsibilities on me to pay attention to that detail. Okay. Going further in the Gemara on Daf Chet, Le'olam yikanes adam shnei petachim bebeit knesset. Now this is an interesting statement too. Forever, always, a person should enter two different doorways of the synagogue. What does that mean? It's a wonder, the Rav says. Shnei petachim, is it really talking about I have to go in this door and then go out and come back in the other door? Is that really what it's trying to tell me? Is that why the rabbis are still around telling me things like that? No, I don't think so. Sakadatach, you thought so. So the rabbi brings a note. Well, you could have thought when there's a big Knesset with only one doorway, then what do I do then? I'm supposed to enter two doorways? What does this mean? It's a synagogue. Or Shnei Petachim, the measure of two doorways. No, that's also an interesting idea. What does that mean? And afterwards he prays. And this is the fulfillment of what we just learned before from Shlomo HaMelech, Lishmor mizuzot pitachai, that you will guard the doorposts of my entryways. In other words, Petuchai is written in a plural form, more than one doorway. And it's teaching us, I think, well, for one thing, it's teaching us something a bit of architecture, that no large structure should have only one door. Because if anything happens, God forbid, something could, people are not going to have a way out. So there should be always two doors, two entrance ways. What is this phrase, shi'or p'tachim? Okay, so I'm going to look, see if Rabbeinu Rashi says anything. Shi'or shnei p'tachim, okay. Rashi, in his inimicable style, rochav, yikenes lifnim, the width of the doorway should go in through, to enter within. Shelo yeshiv samuk lapetach, that a person should not sit next to the door. Why? Why shouldn't we sit next to the door? What's the problem with that? Because it looks like he's getting ready to take off, or it looks like he's, he doesn't really want to be there. He just wants to be near the door so he can get out fast. I imagine people have had that feeling more than once. You go to a class, maybe you'll listen, maybe you won't. You're tired. Maybe the rabbi is going to bore you. He's going to talk too much. A lot of things happen, right? So if I sit near the door, I can get out fast. But that's not really what we call Yirat Shamayim, the awe of God, the love of being where you are and doing what you're doing, which is really a big test in religion. To be religious at any level, at any caliber, you have to love what you're doing, or who are you fooling? So sitting next to the door with one foot out is not the way to go. But nonetheless, and the Rav even adds, Rashi adds, mizuman samuk lepetach, that's it. It will be easy for him to get out of the place if he needs to. Now, this kind of halacha is interesting because Rav Mordechai Shirabi, alav shalom, a big tzaddik from the previous generation of Kabbalists, who founded Nahar Shalom, where I've been blessed to be for 28 years, that nobody sits in, of course. It's a dedication to him, but he sat next to the door. But look at the difference between a tzaddik and a guy who wants to run out. Rav Mordechai used to sit there and hand out tzedakah to all the kids who would pray. And a couple of the rabbis that I know there, Baruch Hashem, they were children when the Rav was living, and the Rav would give a lira to each kid that came to pray. Now that lira, I'm not so expert in former currency rates because there are no more liras operating in Israel, but if I'm not mistaken, it would be equivalent to about $5. Maybe a little more, 20 shekels, something like that, maybe a little more. But, for the rabbi to sit by the door, then it makes much more sense because he's giving money out to all the kids who come in. So you see how, even though the halacha is teaching you one side, there's another side to it. We have to remember this principle, not to take things on face value, not to look at only one side of things, because maybe your neighbor doesn't go to shul, but he's a great guy. He's a tzaddik in his own way, and there's reasons why he doesn't go. And who are we to judge? The rabbis, they write in a formulaic way that tell us, all things being equal, you should go to shul. And if you don't go, you're called a not good neighbor. Okay, but all things being equal never really exists because we're all in context. We're all living with the multitude of stresses and storms and drangs and all that good stuff in our lives. So I think it's very important to remember this when we're learning the words of the rabbis, that we take them as one side of a many-sided complex issue. And that actually relieves pressure from my black and white thinking. Black and white thinking is one of the things that destroys good religion. Black and white thinking is not the intention of the Torah, nor the rabbis, and nor Hashem himself. Black and white thinking comes because we're young, we're immature, we have not yet developed a broad perspective of issues when we face any question. So this is work, and this is why we're here. Okay. going forward. So the Rav says, the Gemara goes on like this. This pasuk, if you find me, you find life. The rabbis talked about this verse. Al zot yitpalel chasid elecha le'et matzo rak leshetev maim rabim. This he will pray. Every pious person will pray le'et matzo, at the time of the finding, the time of the connection. When you find God, it's like a connection, like it's like, in the Lahavdil, like in the Matrix, when they plug the guy in. When you find God, you're plugged in. And on that note, by the way, the Baal Shem Tov says in the Amud Tefillah, which is a book that hopefully that I gave about 10 on Amud Tefillah by the Baal Shem Tov. It's Tov Ala Torah. It is a mandatory reading for anybody who wants to pray properly with love and awe in his heart. Okay. Those classes will be available on YouTube Live, perhaps on Facebook if I ever get out of Facebook jail. I've got my lawyers talking to them, but they're hard to get a hold of. They're like kind of big, when you got 2 million customers, where do you start? Anyways, it's good to laugh. But that the 8th, the timing, rak leshetev maim rabim elav, and then the flood waters, the great flood waters will not reach him. Now, flood waters in the negative context. Remember, water is always Torah, which is a very positive thing, positive context. But when you see maim rabim, that can also reflect on the pshat level floods, but it also reflects too much Torah. Hashem, and a great will comes out from God. Remember, we live in a world of duality where we think my will is my will. I got it, baby. It's here. No. The real will is the will that God sends me. It looks like my will. It comes in the garment of my mind. It comes in the consciousness as if it's my desire. But the higher desire is from Hashem. And that's his will. So it's a very tight, precise distinction that we all need to learn to make. My will, it comes and goes. What we're after is Hashem's will. Okay. Now the Gemara go on to bring an example of a man who's looking for a wife. Like for example, in Eretz Yisrael, remember they're speaking from Babylon here. In Eretz Yisrael, it's like when a person goes to find a wife, Amrile Hachi, they say to him, Matzah or Motze? Oh boy. They say, did you find one or did you get rid of one? Well, that's pleasant. In other words, have you found good? Or are you contemplating calling your lawyer? And so, of course, the subtext of the question is, Matzah Isha Matzah Tov, Yifak Ratzon Me'Hashem. Have you found the good that promised you to Shlomo in Mishlei? Have you found that good that he promised you? Or not? Of course, we know that there are many marriages that don't work out too good. And people suffer tremendously because of this, especially now in our generation. We have the single generation is upon us. But nonetheless, if you found a wife, a good wife, you have found a good thing forever. Okay. Shlomo says in Kahelet, the opposite side of the reality, I've found the bitterness of death is more bitter than a woman. Now, anybody who's been married and has had a fight, a real fight with their spouse, knows there's a little psychic barrier over there that tells you, I just want to die. This is so bad, I want to die. This fight. And of course, nobody really wants to die from a fight with their spouse. But you feel that way at the moment. Now, as a therapist, I can tell you I've met many people that just say, oh, I just want to die. And it's like an automatic phrase. I want to die. I feel like dying. I should die. I should have died. All kinds of things, like dying is a metaphor for our pain. Okay? And that's the way they use it. And even children here in Israel, especially, they'll say, oh, and I guess in other cultures as well, in the States, people, they say things like, oh, I would die for a new Jaguar. Or I'll die for that ice cream. You know, it's just a way of speaking in hyperbole, exaggeration to emphasize a point. But nobody wants to die for a Jaguar or for ice cream. But it's a usage of language which is very accepted in the broad world, but in the Torah world, we're not so lenient with our speech. We're not so loose with our phrases and our exaggerations. You know, when I hear my kids say, oh, I could die for that skateboard, I'm like, no, don't speak that way. Now, God, of course, knows that the kid doesn't really mean he wants to die for a new skateboard. What good is a new skateboard if you're not here to ride it? But rather, of course, he's exaggerating his desire for the thing. But prayer, turn these desires into prayers, because that's really what they are. Because the desire for a skateboard is embedded inside the soul of a kid. Guess what? That spark of desire for that thing is connected deep into his soul. Send me a new skateboard. You know, and this is really a huge paradigm shift in the mind. Now, most teenagers that are riding skateboards are not going to necessarily jump on that idea, but certainly as people who have been around the block a little bit and have learned some Torah, and when you do that, then you'll really understand. Ark is a capsule of desire. A potato chip has a capsule of desire in it. You want it? You want to eat that potato chip? Great. You wouldn't want it unless it had a capsule of desire by you. Other people would look at that potato chip and not even think about eating it. That means there's no spark by them. So understand this. It's very important. The Ilu Rabbi Natan Savur, the Gemara goes on, Mechi Zom Mita. Is this really, excuse me, I jumped a line. One more time. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar le'et motzei, at the time of the finding, Zomita sharui le'adam litpalel le'et matzo, rather, it's fitting for a person to pray about his own death. That a person should pray that when he leaves the world, it's in not comfort, wrong word, shalva, tranquility, that we should leave the world in peace. Lamavet totzaot, he brings from Tehillim. And totzaot, what is it telling us? Lamavet, the results of death. Matza'o, and which the Rav defines here as the words of identity. I found it. Listen, 933 not 902 or 904, 903 types of death were created in the world. And what do you mean? To die is the results of death? Askara. Now, askara is the name of a disease, lo aleinu. I believe it is a disease where the throat is seized. I'm looking around the notes. Ishtar Angulmant Belaz. Okay, wonderful. I have to work on my ancient French. But he tells us Shebetoch Aguf. Okay. But it is a disease where there's a seizure, I believe, is taking place. It could be related to epilepsy nowadays, but askara is a known disease from that time that does cause, is centered in the throat and causes a person to suffocate. Now, nicha shebakulam. Now, the easiest type of death is called nishika, the kiss. The kiss of death is considered the best way to die. Askara damia kechizra begavava kechizra gavava da amara delachoy nishra. It's like a thorn which is caught up in wool, been sheared off the sheep. There's a type of dying where it's like dragging a thorn through wool. Now, which would you rather go through? Oh, piture pia veshet. Excuse me. It's like a rope. Piture veshet, and it's forced down there. Okay, so this is different diseases, but it seems like some inflammation of the throat is going on to prevent breathing and to prevent eating, etc. A kiss, something easy, something sweet. Kamashchal benita nechavla. What is this like? It's like taking, hopefully that doesn't happen at Dunkin' Donuts, right? But if it does, you just flick the hair out of the milk. Assumedly, some people can't do that either, right? But nonetheless, that's called an easy death because you're leaving the body as easily as that. And you see, so leaving the body is death. You don't die, first of all. Nobody dies to embrace my wife and children, etc., etc. No, that's true. Those are real things. But the pain that people feel when they think about death is not really about that as much as the actual physical pain. But the physical pain depends on being attached to the body. And the Rav goes on to tell us a person should pray that he should not have a difficult death. No. Even the way you die, you're allowed to pray for and should pray for. Because we don't know what's coming. God forbid, lo aleinu, we see what goes on in the world and how people, the strange ways that people can die. We don't want to be part of that. So never discount your desire to pray for anything. Because that might just be what God wants to give you if you just ask for it. Rabbi Yochanan Savar ki et matzo, this time of the finding zo akvura. He says that you find that we should pray for a burial that is fitting, has honor, is distinction and grace for your family and those who remain after you. And this is a siyua to Rabbi Yochanan Netzah Motze Rabbi Chanina b'divrei vas samachtim elai gil yasisu. Now he brings, this is like the verse Rabbi Chanina brings, right? Hasimechim elai gil yasisu. That someone who is happy with me will reveal joy. Ki Yamatsu Kever, because he's found the grave. Well, I guess it's not as bad as we think. V'harei sheyishnam, we see that there are situations in life where if he finds the grave, it could actually be very good for him. A person who is really in a horrible situation and he wanted to die, he was not well. He wanted to use a form of euthanasia, which I understand is now legal in California, or it's been. And he wanted to die because life was too hard and there's too much pain. The idea of pain and the idea of atonement, that pain is the vehicle of atonement, of coming back to attachment to Hashem. But sometimes it's just too much. And it's been good so far. I've enjoyed being here with all of you. I thought we'd change gears and in a moment to learn some Chassidut, but let's end the paragraph. That a person, that people say, Hainu Damar Inche, people say, in the name of Rav Shila brings, Enash Rachamei Afilu Ad Zib. People say that a person should pray for mercy even until